Kathleen Lane, and I'm super excited for this first Empower series. And tonight's extra special. You're going to hear mostly tonight from Wendy Oakes, who's a professor extraordinaire. She has this incredibly long, well-deserved title. And she and I have been doing this since before Zoom was ever a thing. And this used to be in person at the Alumni Center. And it used to be in a professional learning place that in North Carolina. And I remember buying a house that was right next to it so I could walk there. No joke. So anyway, we're super excited for the time with you all. And we also are going to be hearing from Elise Saracen, who's been coordinating this entire series. And we have a special guest star appearance of Allison Bernard, who is filling in tonight for Stacy, and we're holding good thoughts for her. And if everybody who's here as a coach tonight, a Ci3T coach, you've got the wonderful group of people. If you want to go ahead and give yourselves a shout out, raise your hand. So tonight we are talking about starting the year off strong, being fit in our fitness and effective at Tier 1. So I'm just going to give you just a quick little overview of what we're going to do tonight. And tonight's going to have two big parts and hopefully two really great conversations with yourselves. And then we're going to do some wrap up at the end. And we are a very informal group. We are grateful for your time, your talent, your expertise, and we are excited for those breakout room conversations. So thank you so much for getting ready to be engaged in those. As you're logging into the website, you're going to hear the presenters tonight talk about different resources, and I just want to reassure you, you have access to this Empower session, and it is going to be recorded. It'll be available on our website in about 2 to 2.5 weeks. Our goal is 2, but we're going to create a little bit of a confidence interval around that. And you're also going to hear the presenters talk about a bank of resources that you may want to go get right now. And the good news is if you've already registered one time as a first-time user, you're going to have access to all the resources. If you have done this like last year, like I know already been in there, she's checked these things out. She does not need to do that again, and neither do you. But if you're a first-time user, please feel free to register. So just to set the stage, thinking about kicking off this year, most of you have already launched your academic year. And tonight is a night to push pause and think intentionally about how it's gone, what it might look like, and what it could be like if you were moving towards building a Ci3T system. So in a comprehensive, integrated, 3-tiered model of prevention, you can think about this as a broadening of traditional multi-tiered systems of support. So when you look at this triangle, this was developed in the late 90s. And the whole idea was rather than having different groups of very well-intended people, like one group in looking at academic data, one looking at behavior data, and one looking at well-being data, because we know that kids come with the whole package, we want to make sure they're walking into systems where the system is prepared to look at data to see how students are doing in each of those domains. And we want to simplify things for the adults. So as you're thinking about Ci3T, whether you have one in place or you have a similar integrated system, we just want to set the stage just very quickly to say that in a Ci3T, it's a data-informed process. It's a data-informed building process. So teams come together, they walk through a manualized process, they get information from all the faculty and staff in their schools. And by doing that, they're gleaning information to make some decisions about what it's going to look like in terms of teaching expected behavior for academics at Tier 1. So how we're going to teach reading, how we're going to teach math, how we're going to teach writing, how we're going to address content areas. What strategies, practices, programs are we going to do at Tier 1 for everybody? Very important, including the use of low-intensity strategies. The second thing in a Ci3T system is that we have a tool called the School-Wide Expectation Survey for specific settings. And that's a survey that goes out to every adult that's employed, custodian workers, cafeteria workers, school psychologists, social workers, gen ed teachers, special ed teachers, front office staff, everybody, because they're all weighing in, including the bus driver, on what they think kids need to know to do well in that setting, in the classroom, in the hallways, and arrival and dismissal, during sporting events. So all those key settings, we're going to do a data-informed approach so that you're teaching things that are valued and prioritized by the adults in the school. And the last piece of the base of this is a commitment to social and emotional well-being. So it's looking to bring in a validated resource. We often rest on What Works Clearinghouse to go look to see what works for whom and under what conditions. And usually the decision is made at a district level to say, here's what we're going to do at the high school, or here's what we're going to do at the middle school, or here's what we're going to do at the elementary level. But that whole thing is what gets taught. That is the Tier 1 experience. And so in districts across the United States and now internationally, we want to make sure that we're supporting people and making sure that districts are making decisions so that what they're putting in the hands of every principal leader and school site team leader, every Ci3T leadership team, is essentially a document that explains this is how we do it. So if you've listened to the great philosopher Michael Jordan, no, Montel Jordan, excuse me, this is how we do it. This is how we do it. It's all broken down in your Ci3T implementation manual. So in there, it specifies what that tier one experience is going to be. And now, thanks to the generosity of the Institute for Education Sciences, we have $3 million, $4 million actually, of resources available to help with implementation at tier one. And each building, they get clarity from the district as to what is going to be the plan when kids need more than tier one has to offer. So rather than it being a separate list for here's what we're going to do academically, behaviorally, and socially, we're again focusing on that idea of integrating it. So I might need a tier two reading intervention, but I also might need a self-monitoring intervention layered on top to help me engage in that extra support. And there absolutely will be kids that have tier three needs. That is not special education. Tier three means kids that have intensive intervention needs, like functional assessment based interventions that like Elise is very interested in. And they might be building on top of check-in, check-out interventions, like for kids with internalizing issues it's a priority of Allie's. But essentially, the idea is transparency of what is being offered, what is being promised, and it's all built with input from people, including family members. And in these models, when it is put in place, we want to make sure it is happening. So you're going to hear throughout this whole different set of experiences across this year that we want to make sure that schools have a plan in place for knowing, is it happening at tier one? Like, are these things that we said we were going to do? Like our plans for teaching and reinforcing and using data to derive those decisions, specifically screening to thread the needle for people to get movement across the tiers. Is that happening? And every adult gets a voice in these schools. So to find out, what do you think about the goals, the procedures, and the outcomes? That's the social validity piece. And so it's not just looking at that for tier two and tier three, but if tier one practices, what do people think about the goals, procedures, and the outcomes? What's happening with fidelity? And very importantly, how is this working for kids? So today, as we are coming to you, we have had the opportunity to make transparent a huge bridge. We often talk about that schism between research and practice, and there needs to be a bridge. I don't think we have a missing bridge in Ci3T because we've had these wonderful long-term partnerships for almost 30 years, no joke. And we've learned from people to build the resources that they need to put it in place. So today we are here. This is a standalone session. This is kind of like speed dating for professional learning. You don't have to come to all the sessions, but you can if you would like to. And each of these is designed to give you information that we hope is useful to you as faculty, staff, paraprofessionals, administrators, technical assistance providers, district leaders for this moment in time. And I'm going to sing Give Me One Moment in Time right now, but I don't have her lungs. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how do you make this happen? So what are the responsibilities of educators working in these systems? So how do we get tier one in place? And then specifically, how do we do that for academics, behavior, and social emotional well-being in an integrated fashion? And tonight, what we're going to do is two main things. And you're going to get to hear from two of my dear friends, colleagues, and I think you're going to hopefully really walk away with some explicit things that you can take back and do starting tomorrow. Very practical. So the first part is going to be hearing from Wendy about understanding tier one. So we want to take a deeper dive in what do we mean by academics, behavior, and social and emotional well-being. And if you have a manual, if you're somebody that's at a Ci3T school today, pull it up. And if not, we're going to show you some illustrations. And then you're going to hear from Elise Saracen, and she's going to talk to you about how do you do it? Like, how do you teach in a way that's integrated? How do you reinforce those three components? And very importantly, how do we use the data to keep things moving forward? Now, everything that you need for tonight is right there. So if you go to that same place where you registered for Project Empower, and if you see that tab that says, it's like an accordion that says starting strong, effective tier one practices for educators, that is where we are tonight. And now we're going to kick it over to Dr. Oakes.
So thank you, Kathleen, for the fabulous framing that you always provide, first of all. And then we're going to jump into some details. So Kathleen mentioned this thing of a Ci3T implementation manual. And what that is a collection of blueprints that you put together as you're building your plan over your design year. And the importance of the manual is two things, right? We talk a lot about building in clarity, offering clarity of what's happening in your school, and also this idea of transparency. So there shouldn't be things happening in the school that everyone doesn't know about. There might be a really fabulous resource happening in your school building, and then not all kids might have access to that because it's not clearly available. And that's one of the things that the manual does. So we also know that teacher time is, our time in general, not just teacher time. As I was writing that out or thinking about it, I was like, wait a minute, it's not just teacher's time, it's kids' time. You have one experience in first grade, you have one experience in second grade. And so we know that's one of our most precious resources. And so we want to make sure what we have in place to offer students and support teachers is the most effective practices that we know about, right? And so we're thinking about curriculum that you're adopting, strategies that you're using, the measures and resources. At least we'll talk more about monitoring a little bit later, but all of those things are the best that you can have so that your time is really being used to the benefit of students. So, tier one, we're going to talk about tier one first. And we're going to start with the academic domain. So, tier one allows us to really detail out the practices that we're going to be using for all students. And specifically in a Ci3T model, we're looking at academic, behavioral, and social emotional well-being domains. And the way that they look on the screen is in these columns, but we're really going to talk about how they are integrated and interact across those spaces. All right, so this is what the primary plan would look like, or the tier one plan. And sorry, I keep looking over here because that's where it is on my screen. But so this is the first page of the tier one plan. And what we start to think about is this phrase that we use a lot on our team called clear as kind, right? And so we want to be really clear about what we're offering in our building. And to bring that clarity, we're going to start with identifying the roles and responsibilities for each of the major stakeholders in our school so that they know what the expectations are for them in terms of how they contribute to the overall work of promoting outcomes for kids. Um, and hold on. Okay, so on here, in terms of that clarity, we're talking about the level of detail of naming the curriculum. So if you have a validated reading curriculum that you're using in your building, the name of it goes here. So no one is trying to figure out, what am I supposed to use for teaching when they first join your staff? They know exactly what it is. They know how much time is spent on reading, how much time is spent on math instruction, and so forth. So it's detailed out specifically. Think about what a gift that is for new teachers and also teachers who are new to the profession, but also new to your building or your district. All right. So not only do we write out the curriculum in those kinds of details, but we also want to tell or detail out what these practices are that we expect, right? And so we expect people to align their instruction with the standards that are driving the learning expectations for our students. And we also have this idea that Kathleen touched on just a bit. And sometimes when she starts to talk about something, I'm like, oh no, don't steal what I wanted to say. So we're going to talk a little bit more about low intensity strategies and how we use them in our instruction. But these are strategies that teachers can use with fairly little amount of preparation time. You can learn them pretty quickly, and they have a lot of benefit for increasing students' engagement in the learning activities that you're offering. And as a result of being fully engaged in the instruction, there's fewer disruptions that occur. And these are effective in all types of settings. So whether you're a special education teacher, you're a general education teacher, K-12, these have lots of evidence for their use. This is going to be a pattern you'll see. I'm going to show you some of the modules we have available for the things to support each of these sections. And then I will also show you how you can come back together with us to learn more of these things. So these are the low intensity modules that you will see. And we've had schools use these in really interesting ways. You might choose one of these a month that you want to engage with your faculty and staff, so that you have sort of this collective energy around learning a specific strategy. You can reinforce each other for using it. You can be on the lookout for and give feedback, and kind of share ideas of how that's working in your classroom. These are available for you, as Kathleen mentioned. You register one time and then you have access to all of these. So in terms of a takeaway that you could use right away, this is an excellent place to start. All right, so this is one of the resources that's available, and you will see in the upper right-hand corner a little card, title page, card cover, I don't know what it's called at least. That tells you where any resource that we are sharing is from. So this video that we're going to watch right now is located in that Tier 1 module, and you can use it as you would like.
Embedding low-intensity supports in daily instruction. It's almost time for the reading block in Mrs. O's class. As she begins to transition her students to the carpet, she uses pre-correction to remind them of the Lincoln Lion expectations she wants to see.
Okay class, as you're moving to the rug for reading time, remember to show respect by going right to your square and keeping your voice at a level 1.
As she sends students off to their designated areas, Miss O actively supervises the transition by moving throughout the room and keeping an eye out for students who are following the expectations so that she can acknowledge them with behavior-specific praise.
Timmy, thanks for walking right to the carpet and sitting down. Sarah, looking good sitting crisscross applesauce in your own square. Thank you.
As she starts the lesson, Miss O uses pre-correction again to let her students know what she is looking for as they work.
Alright, as we begin to learn our vocabulary words of the week, I'm looking for students to give their best effort answering the questions asked. Please remember to exercise self-control also by raising your hand if you need anything and keeping your hands and feet to yourself. Let's get started.
Throughout the lesson, Miss O uses opportunities to respond with her students by having them hold up response cards to the questions she asks. She also uses pre-correction and behavior-specific praise to help them use the cards as desired.
Alright students, let's review our vocabulary words. I'll ask you a question and you will use your response cards to show me your answer. Once the question is asked, be responsible by keeping your response card in front of you when you show your answer. Okay students, hold up your green card when you hear the correct definition of the word habitat. A habitat is what an animal eats, the name of a baby animal, the natural home of an animal or plant. Oh, I saw a lot of green cards on that last one. That's right, habitat is a word we can use to describe the place where an animal lives in nature. For example, the habitat of an alligator might be a swamp, river, or lake. Hannah, thanks for staying in your square and holding your response card right in front of you for that question.
Embedding low-intensity strategies into daily instruction helps Miss O prevent challenging behavior from occurring and supports student engagement in the classroom.
So that video is really just an opportunity to share with you a little information. You can use that video, but really thinking about these strategies that we want to be part of the roles and responsibilities for all of our instructional personnel in our schools, so that we are supporting kids the best that we can to engage in the learning and instruction. We need kids to stay in class and stay engaged in learning so that they have success in education and have opportunities for their future. So what we want to do is just engage you in a little bit of the chat discussion. So one of these two questions, we would love to hear how you're thinking about them. So how do you integrate low intensity teacher delivered strategies into your lessons or daily routines already? How are you using these? And what opportunities exist for you to bring these strategies into those routines if you're not yet using them or if you want to adopt a new one? So, your opportunity to learn more about this would be at an upcoming Project Empower session. So, the one in January specifically is going to be talking about behavior specific praise and pre correction. And those are the two modules you can preview, come with questions, come with ideas, ready to learn and share with others. Okay, so let's move into looking a little bit deeper at the behavioral domain. And so in the behavioral domain, and again, this is a picture of the primary plan or the tier 1 plan, and we're just moving over to that next element, but again, thinking about roles and responsibilities. And we're only showing the one for faculty and staff, but the plan has roles and responsibilities for students, for families, so they actually know how to engage and support their student at school, and importantly for administrators, so the faculty and staff can actually tell the administrators what they need in order to do this work well. The behavioral component here is positive behavior interventions and support. So, really establishing clear expectations for how students are successful in the classroom space. And we're moving away from where every teacher kind of does their own thing, and we've been in that space for a really long time. The kids come in, you shut your door, you teach them what you want to teach them, according to standards and so forth, but then you use whatever behavioral strategies work for you. And that might work in your classroom space, but what it doesn't do is it doesn't allow kids to build skills that work across various settings, right? And so, or across other adults. So while you're in the building, that might be fine, but if you have a substitute come in, then there might be challenges because that person might have different expectations for how students should behave in the classroom. And so again, this just really brings that clearness and kindness of making sure that we tell kids and teach them exactly what they need to do in the social setting of school to be successful and meet the expectations of the adults in the classroom, in the school settings, cafeteria, as Kathleen said, all over the school building. And then they're getting reinforcement and feedback from all of those adults, and it's not contradictory. It really is a kindness for kids. So in terms of the roles and responsibilities for faculty in the behavioral our piece, we want all teachers teaching these expectations, right? So we have the set of expectations we've agreed to as a school. Everybody is going to teach their students how to meet them, assuming that with instruction, every student will meet the expectations for the setting. And then we have resources and tools to be able to do that. So this is the classroom expectations specifically. You'll see the matrix in a minute, but this pulls out just that classroom piece and also shows an example of what that might look like in a direct instruction template for a lesson. Then we're going to make sure we're displaying them so that we can be using it as an instructional tool. Lots of people in the chat just said pre-correction is so important. This is where you ground your pre-corrections. You're grounding them in these things that you actually are expecting students to do, because these are the things that are most important for success in that setting. You're also then going to make sure you're using both your words, a very powerful tool, your attention and your words, telling kids exactly how they met the expectation. So not just saying good job, but good job for what? And then also making sure you're pairing it with whatever the school's reinforcement system is. So moving away again from individual classroom systems of marbles and toads and all kinds of things that we used to use for reinforcement to one system that is sort of universally used and accepted in the school that allows them to then access the reinforcer of their choice. So these are two of the modules that specifically address that. The universal reinforcement system, I always have to give an extra plug to, because it is one of the things that Kathleen and I have heard over her last 30 years of doing this work and my last 15 years is all kinds of tension with praising kids, letting kids know they're doing the right thing, acknowledging kids for meeting expectations. This module explains it in a really clear way, and so I would absolutely encourage you to visit that resource. All right. And then also we know that, the proactive pieces are not always enough, right? That's the continuum of supports that we offer. And so we're also thinking about using a reactive plan that also is very clear, consistently used with integrity and very spelled out. And the key piece of this, which I'm going to go ahead and bring them. Oh, I wanted to bring that module in. Sorry. Is that we're using what Allison loves and has presented on many, many times as the 6-step instructional approach, right? And so we're really thinking about these are kids that we care about. We care about the learning. We care about them. So we're going to start with empathy. We're going to start by keeping the classroom moving. We're going to go through the steps of making sure we're attending to the behavior, but also not shutting instruction down for all the other learners and for even that learner. And then we're going to move through our system again with fidelity, with consistency, clearness, and kindness. To learn more about this 6-step instructional approach, we invite you to join us in February. So again, module available for you to use tomorrow or today if it's 6:30 and you're in Korea and you you want to read it today. And also then to come back and join us for that session, engage in some discussion. All right, the last piece is around the social domain. The social domain is very much like the academic one in terms of a validated resource or curriculum that you bring into your school. So you actually have opportunities to directly teach students and engage students in practice in demonstrating pro-social kinds of behaviors and skills that will help them have successful friendships, be successful students in school, be successful in the community and all of the spaces they interact, and ultimately in their adult lives. So we want to talk about like doing that with consistency. So it gets spelled out here, the name of it, how much time. A lot of times there'll be a plan linked in here as to when certain lessons are taught, so that all the students in your building are learning the same skills at the same time, and adults are then available to reinforce, engage in discussion, connect that language into every interaction that they have with students. And again, you can see on here, we're really naming that instruction. Kathleen mentioned the What Works Clearinghouse site, which is where you can go and look for some validated programs, look for some evidence that supports what you're using. You want to make sure that it works for your context, your kids, and your goals that you have. And then also making sure that we're bringing parents into this conversation and our community partners into this conversation as partners with us on this work. All right, so we have a couple of tools. Thank you, Kathleen, for putting that in there. We have a couple of tools that you can use, this embedding and integrating Ci3T domains into daily instruction. What we know is that we're not teaching any of these 3 domains in isolation, but kids come to us, right, with their behaviors into the academic space and so forth. And so we want to make sure we're thinking about how we continue to support their behavior and then meeting expectations during academic instruction, and also make sure we're weaving in that social emotional well-being learning into instruction, so they have lots of real authentic opportunities to practice and use these skills. And then we have an integrated lesson plan that we developed a while ago that tries to just highlight how to do the integration. So you're welcome to use this template if it follows your instructional plan that you use in your building. You're welcome to download it and edit it as you would like so that it better matches the instructional plan that you require. Or you can just use it as an idea of thinking about how to bring these spaces together. So the first thing you'll see on here is that whenever we as instructional leaders are writing a lesson plan, we're thinking about our academic objective, we're thinking about the behaviors that are on our expectation matrix that are going to help students be successful and engaging in that activity, and also what social skills that they might need to be able to have a successful experience. Classrooms are very social context, right? And so we have to help kids navigate that as they're also trying to learn academics and meet behavioral expectations. And think about that from a student perspective. That's a huge ask to be using all of those learning domains in one integrated way. And so this allows us to be very explicit about the way that we're supporting them. The other piece, again, is just we can't highlight enough the low intensity strategies because they're so easy to learn, they're so impactful for kids, and they support all kinds of instruction and all kinds of benefits in terms of behavior. So this allows you, as you're thinking about each element of your lesson plan, where are the times where I really need to have really strong active supervision? Where can I build in choice? Where do I make sure that I'm actually praising students? And I would even recommend for some of your teachers, when this is really new to them, actually writing out the statements that you could use. And you're not going to read them off a script, but it's going to prompt you and it's going to give you something authentic that you've thought through as you've been walking your mind through the lesson that you're going to deliver. This lesson plan also gives this opportunity for teachers to be reflective. So if you are going through each one of those modules and introducing one a month and trying to get a little bit of energy around them in your building, this provides an opportunity for people to actions about using this and then come back and talk to each other about what they're experiencing, how confident they're feeling, how useful they think it might be in their work. All right, so let's look at what an integrated lesson plan.
In this example of integrating academic, behavior, and social domains, imagine a teacher who is designing an academic lesson where students work in teams to explore measurement using fractions. The teacher set up the learning environment for students to conduct experiments using a variety of tools. Although this is primarily an academic task, the teacher stops to think about behaviors and social skills needed to successfully navigate the team activity. The teacher considers the school-wide behavior expectation matrix and the column for the classroom setting and determines 2 expectations and routines connected to them fit with this shared activity. Then the teacher considers the school-wide social skills curriculum and determines students need 5 of the previously taught social skills to engage in a successful, productive team collaboration. By integrating these into the lesson plan in advance through pre-correction, reteaching, and reinforcing, the teacher can promote behavioral expectations and social skills for students to engage in a positive, productive, safe learning environment. For more information, visit Ci3T.org.
If you want to learn more about either developing your own lesson plan, supporting others, and using a more integrated approach to thinking about instruction, we invite you to join us in November. All right, so that brings us to our first work time.
So as we're talking right now about what does this look like academically, behavior, and socially, we know the year has started. And we want to think about not just teaching these things one time. We want to think about what's that pattern of positive and productive practice that's going to happen all throughout the year. So if you're hearing ideas that you feel like, ooh, I wish I would have done that this year, there's still time. You've got the whole rest of the school year to do it. Think about like, what could that message be where you might share out in principal meetings or to yourself as a teacher to say, I'm going to challenge myself to make sure I'm reteaching expected behaviors at the beginning of every month, or I'm going to take an opportunity to see where I'm having problems areas and then use those as teaching opportunities. So thank you. And now we're going to get a chance to hear from Elise as she clicks to the next slide. And so now that you've thought about the 3 domains, Elise is going to put it together for us in terms of providing an integrated experience.
All right, so Wendy did such an incredible job of setting us up to think about what are these 3 domains and what does that look like and how do we share really openly with every person in our building, every person in our community, what we are committing to as a school for every single student in our building. And now we're going to think about what does it look like to roll that out? What does it look like to teach that? What does it look like to reinforce it? And what does it look like to monitor if it's working? So let's go ahead and start with procedures for teaching. And if you're following along in your Ci3T implementation manual, you'll see this table where your team, when they went through that building process, that year-long process to build out your manual, where they listed out, here are the strategies we're going to use to teach our plan to faculty and staff, to students, and to our community, to families in our broader community. And when we're thinking about opportunities to really intentionally teach and broaden the impact for all of our faculty and staff, we're looking at things like, how are we sharing our implementation manual? How do we make sure that every single person in our building has a copy? Maybe it's a digital copy through like Google Drive, if that's what your school uses. Maybe it's a hard copy. We saw one of the schools we work with made this like really cool flip book, very cool. And then teachers could put it on their clipboards, and they always had it with them, but they had both a hard copy and a physical copy so that teachers could look and could go and reference and say, like, what was that piece again? Or we'll talk about in future sessions those intervention grids to help connect students to validated supports. Those are in that manual. So it's really important that people have a copy. Then we're also going to think about those expectation matrices like Wendy was talking through. We want to make sure those are printed and available and up in our spaces. So in our classrooms, in our hallways, that any space that has a matrix has one that is printed and posted. It can be helpful to think about what are maybe like smaller versions of those. So we've got a template on our website for bookmarks and posters that could be used so that we have those expectations in a more portable format so that we can continue to use those as a teaching tool. Oftentimes, it can be helpful to have like a ticket tip sheet, kind of like a one pager that just has the high level, like, here's how we use our universal reinforcement system. And that can be super helpful as a refresher for your entire staff. It can be really helpful if you have staff who are maybe shared between buildings. So maybe some of your special education teachers or related service providers or substitutes work across multiple buildings. It might be really important for them to understand, what does it look like to use that universal reinforcement system here at this school? What are the expectations, and what are some example praise statements I might use? And then thinking about what are all the different ways we can offer professional learning to help set our staff up to feel really confident, and how do I execute this plan? So we want to think about onboarding. How are we welcoming new staff? Anyone who's new in our building, how do we tell them, like, this is who we are, this is what we do, here's our manual, here's how we use it, here's why we do this. And really thinking about what would it look like to set someone up with both that professional learning and the ongoing mentorship to continue to implement really well and ask questions. I know I had like 700 questions in my first month as a first year teacher, and my mentor maybe hated me or maybe loved me. But how are you setting someone up with a mentor who can help answer those questions? And then we want to think too, as you're thinking about professional learning, typically we're really lucky to have time in front of our like faculty and staff, maybe faculty meetings or professional learning communities. But oftentimes we have to get a little creative when we think about, how do I make sure I've got time with our custodial staff, our cafeteria staff, our front office, our bus drivers, substitute teachers, people who are really important to making sure our building is running smoothly and we're able to implement this plan well and consistently, but might not be at that faculty meeting. So thinking about, is there like a video we could give them? That's what one school did here. They had a really quick 2.5-minute video that they gave to substitute teachers. So they knew, like, this is what it's like at our school. So really thinking about, how do we teach this in lots of different ways for all of the adults that are going to be part of implementing this plan. And then we want to think about, okay, how are we going to teach our plan to students? How are we going to teach these expectations? And at the beginning of the year, you usually see these really short but really clear, well-designed lessons to teach kids expectations for different settings. Here is what it looks like in our matrix. These are our expectations for the cafeteria. Here's what it looks like. Here's what it didn't. Let's do a little bit of role play. Let's practice, make sure you're feeling good, and then continuing to repeat those after breaks. Maybe in October, maybe after Thanksgiving break, definitely in January. But how do we just make sure we're constantly reminding kids and explicitly teaching them, this is the expectation in this setting? And if you're looking for a template, we've got one here for you that you could use. And that is, one of my colleagues can put that in the chat for us, but that is in our embedding in daily instruction at 7.2. Same one as integrated lesson planning. We've got that template there for you. You might think about videos. A lot of our kids really love to be featured in videos. And sometimes we've seen schools make these really fun opportunities for kids to practice examples and non-examples of what things look like. So that could be a way to kind of increase that engagement and get kids involved in building out, what does this look like at our school? You could think about announcements and how you leverage that like morning announcement time to help remind kids of expectations. I'm thinking about, how do we use our assemblies, our pep rallies, times we already have in front of kids, to just remind them of, this is what it looks like to meet these expectations in our building. And then it's also really important that you're thinking through our families and our community. Who are all the other folks who are really important to helping us both teach this plan, but also like reinforce it, make sure it's happening, and celebrate when it is. So we want to think about how are we communicating with families. You could think about if you have like a letter or a newsletter already, well, how could you build in like a CI3T tip or a little piece just to help families understand like here's what's going on and here's why. There's a template on our building page if you're interested in like a brochure. And we've also got these infographics that are in some of our modules. One of them is editable. This front one is editable. So you could personalize that for your school. Just a really quick snapshot of here's what CI3T is, here's what it looks like for our school, just so families are feeling really connected and part of that work. You could also think about ways to use your website. A lot of our schools have a whole tab just for CI3T where they put the manual and some resources for families. We also have in our low intensity strategies modules, we have some family resources. So if a parent's saying like, man, I'm really looking for some support in what I could do at home, you might say, you know what, at school, we've been practicing with behavior specific praise. I'd be happy to share with you some resources of what that might look like at home. And it's just coaching families on what that could look like if they were interested in doing that at home. And then last but not least, a lot of schools have some success with reaching out to their community, to businesses and saying like, hey, can you help support our school store? Hey, can you help support us with an experience we could raffle off? So really thinking about community outside the walls of the building and who else could we really welcome in. So after you've thought about, here's our plan, here's how we're going to teach it to our faculty and staff, to our students, and here's how we're going to share it out with our families and our community, we want to think about reinforcement, meaning how do we make sure we celebrate when this is happening so that it continues to happen? And again, if you are following along in your manual, you will see this page where it's listing out here are the ideas that your leadership team generated when they were building out your model, where they said, here's what we think we could do for faculty and staff, and here's what we think we can do for students. And you probably will see a long list of really fantastic ideas for how to keep things fresh and interesting and make sure that people feel seen and celebrated. So when we think about reinforcement, and as Wendy said, anytime we're featuring something from a module in that top right-hand corner, you'll see that card. And that's just to help you so that if later you want to go back and find this, you know where to look. So from our reinforcement module, this is just a screenshot of what is reinforcement. That can kind of sound like a technical term. It's probably, it's more of a tier 3 vocabulary. If you think about tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, I don't use it in my everyday language. But reinforcement is something that strengthens or encourages a behavior, just means it makes it more likely to occur. It's something we're doing so that something is more likely to happen again. So it can be helpful to think about what is reinforcement compared to like a consequence, because reinforcement, as you can kind of see here, reinforcement is anything we're doing that's going to increase the likelihood that something is going to happen. Consequences is just what happens after a behavior. It could be good, bad, or anything in between. Consequence is what happens after a behavior. Reinforcement is something that can happen after a behavior, and we're doing it so that the behavior happens more. And when we think about reinforcement, we want to think about it as either like kids are trying to access something, to get something, so that would be positive, we're like adding something to it, or negative, which doesn't mean bad, it just means like avoiding. So escape or avoid, maybe taking something away that's aversive. So as an example, if we think about it on the like attention, a student might want attention, like adult attention. I really want my teacher to give me praise. I want my friends to laugh at my joke. I want to spend quality time with this adult in my building who I really like. That would be accessing attention, positive reinforcement, making it more likely to occur. Negative reinforcement is avoiding it. Maybe I hate partner work. It makes me really anxious and I get really worried and I just hate doing it. So maybe something I can earn is getting to work by myself. That's reinforcement because I want it. I want to work alone. I want to avoid being with somebody else. That would be reinforcing for me. Not really. I like people. But that would be reinforcing for me because then I don't have to do the partner work, which I don't like. When we think about faculty and staff, we want to think about, okay, what are things we can do when we notice that our plan is being implemented, that we can really share and celebrate that. So that could look like maybe some shout outs, either written like words of affirmation or verbal shout outs at the beginning of a faculty meeting. I know at the school I worked at, I was in charge of sending out a weekly shout out email. People would like put it in a survey. We would evaluate how good PD was that week and they'd put a shout out and then Monday morning I would send it out. So we would start our week with some shout outs and affirmations and love for each other. So it could look like that. It could look like maybe a raffle where you're raffling off gift cards or something that teachers would be really excited about. Some of our schools do like Sonic drinks, or maybe it's something totally free But sometimes the most valuable thing is your time. I know I would do a lot of things to get out of recess duty. Did not like that. Actually, the thing I didn't like more, cafeteria duty. Very loud. Don't love that. I would do a lot to get out of that. So that can be super reinforcing of like, hey, when we pull a ticket out at the assembly, the ticket has the student's name on it and they're getting access to something. And then the teacher who gave out that ticket also gets something. Recess coverage, an extra planning period, getting to come in 10 minutes late, a jeans day, something like that. So with that, we just want to pause for a moment, and in the chat, as Wendy said, you all are coming here with so many experiences and ideas. We would love to listen and learn from you and get inspired. If you could pop in the chat, what is a faculty and staff reinforcer that your school offers? Or maybe it's something you would like to see offered. A lot of these things are very low cost, if not no cost. Giving someone recess coverage or an extra planning period isn't costing anything. And it can be a great time to get an admin in that room to support kids or someone who has that capacity, and kids would be probably really excited to see them. Adults, right? Love words of affirmation. I notice you, I see you, great job, whether it's public or private, parking spots. So lots of great ways, and thinking about like the coffee and treats, that can be where you might be able to tap in if you have like a parent teacher organization or local community, like maybe they would be willing to donate some of those pieces.
Years and years ago when Wendy and I used to do trainings, when this was like first like coming on the scene, we used to get a lot of pushback from adults about like, why should we have to do any kind of acknowledgement for students? Like that was a big thing. So we flipped the training process to first, when people were building their models, start to talk about this first, like how could you acknowledge adults for doing these things? And then we would list all these things out, and then we would go to students and say, now, how do you want to recognize students? And as soon as they would say, but we shouldn't have to acknowledge them, they should do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, then we would say, no, let's think about this for a second. Just a second ago, you were getting very excited about jeans passes and front of the lunch line, and duty coverage. And it was so good because it was like an aha that, yes, getting and avoiding these simple little things did feel good for the adults. And it was a good frame for the thinking about it from the student perspectives. Thanks. Let me jump in, Elise.
Yeah, of course. And that was like the perfect transition because that wasn't even planned.
There we go.
The perfect transition for now. So we were thinking about what does it look like to reinforce the adults in our building? How do we make sure we are recognizing when they're implementing the plan? And now we're going to shift to what does it look like to recognize when students are meeting those expectations? And we're going to start with this brief video that talks about what it looks like to use your universal reinforcement system across grades.
Using your universal reinforcement system across the grades. Having a universal reinforcement system school-wide allows all adults in your school to acknowledge students in a simple, straightforward manner. One system makes it much easier for staff who work with students across different grades and classes, like bus drivers and lunchroom supervisors, to acknowledge students instead of having to be familiar with multiple systems. Ensuring all adults in the building can teach school-wide expectations and acknowledge students for meeting these expectations sends a message of consistency to students, as these procedures are the same across settings and adults they interact with. That said, we acknowledge educators often have questions about how to make a single system work for students at very different developmental levels or with different interests. For example, young students such as kindergartners may have a hard time writing their names on tickets or have difficulty managing the tickets. One way to address this could be to have a bank to put their tickets in as soon as they receive them, like a baggie in their seat pocket or shoe pockets on the wall or door. You might teach students procedures to make the process of managing tickets go smoothly, such as having them write their name at a later designated time, or even to write their class number instead if that's easier. You could even turn management procedures into an activity aligned to math standards, such as making groups of 10 by having students create books of 10 tickets that can be stapled together for easier redemption at a school-wide or classroom store. Sometimes, educators may believe that tickets do not work for older students and express concerns that they think it's too babyish. An important clarification is that it's not necessarily the ticket itself that is reinforcing to students, but rather the feedback students receive when being given the ticket and what the student can access or avoid through the exchange. Using behavior-specific praise genuinely in a way that students prefer, some students may prefer notes or private praise, for example, and seeking out information from students about their preferences on what they might find reinforcing is crucial. You may survey students and have a fun or novel way for them to manage tickets to make it more exciting, such as creating class graphs and using group rewards in addition to individual opportunities. One potential challenge to having a universal system may be when teachers would rather use their own system in the classroom, such as a marble jar. It's great to see teachers motivated to use reinforcement, however, it is fundamental to understand the benefits of a single universal reinforcement system for the whole school. Students should be acknowledged by all staff across settings, as this will support the generalization of behaviors beyond the classroom. Supervisory staff and interventionists will thank you for having a universal system, as this helps them participate more easily, allowing students to receive feedback from all adults. For more resources, please visit ci3t.org.
Awesome. I just love that video. So the video is one of the many resources that comes in that, yeah, great tunes. The universal reinforcement module, as Wendy was kind of alluding to earlier, that one is a really great place to start if you are implementing as a school, like positive intervention, like PBIS, positive behavior intervention supports, or if you have a system like this that's happening in your school, because it's really common that teachers might say like, man, but this isn't really working for my pre-K students, or like our fifth graders just like aren't into that. This can be a helpful place to start. And there's a frequently asked questions in that module that has some potential answers for what you might say if someone is kind of saying like, hey, like, I don't really understand that. Or, that kind of, what about intrinsic motivation? Like this isn't building that. So this video kind of has some good illustrations, but there's also that frequently asked questions that can be a great spot to jump in as well. So kind of as the video talked through, when you're thinking about reinforcement for students, we want to think about having a variety of options. So what you're seeing here is like a reinforcement menu. So giving kids choice and how they might want to exchange their tickets and making sure that there's a variety of options. So when we talked about reinforcement earlier, we talked about accessing or avoiding. We talked about how it might be for like social or attention, activities or tangibles, and sensory. So we want to think about how do we offer a variety of options across those categories so that hopefully there's something on that menu that students would be really excited about exchanging their tickets for. And sometimes if you're feeling a little stuck, it can be really helpful to ask kids. I know one of the schools I got to work with, they were saying, man, we're having a really hard time getting like our fourth and fifth graders invested. And they were like, there's really not into what's in our school store. And they were like, you know what, why don't we just ask them? Like, what do they want? So they made a really quick survey, sent it out to kids. Kids wanted to do a TikTok dance. That is what they wanted to do. That cost $0. And that was great. And kids wanted it, and it was new and it was novel and it was fun. So you might think about sending out a survey to students just to see what they're kind of interested in. And when we think about what could this look like for older students, right, like high schoolers, what might they want? We've had schools do really cool, innovative things. Parking spaces, high schoolers also want those. And sometimes they want one that's like really close to the building so they can get there late and just kind of like pop right on in. And sometimes they want one further away so they don't have to sit in traffic while they're trying to leave the school. So again, like what do kids actually want? Some schools did really interesting, like kind of like at the end zone for the football games where they had like a couch and they would bring in pizza. So cool. Something really interesting. A lot of schools will do things with like prom tickets or semi-formal tickets, but really thinking about what are our kids interested in and how do we make that available to them. So on that note, we'd love to hear from you. What are some of the like unique reinforcers that you've offered maybe in your own classroom or things at your school? What are things that your kids really like to access or avoid? And if you do have a menu, like what's really popular on your menu? Would love to just get some ideas in the chat so we can get inspired. Even as these are coming in, I'm noticing like when you think about kind of that menu of like both a combo of like what can I access, what can I avoid, seeing things that are like attention based, so like lunch with friends, lunch with a teacher, be the principal for a day, things that are kind of attention based. Also things that fall into that like activities or tangibles like chewing gum, classroom store, getting to sit in like a special seat. Those can be things that are activities. And then sensory can be the chewing gum could be a sensory, or like maybe getting to pick the music, getting to wear noise canceling headphones, dim the lights, things like that. Some things that cost money, some things that are totally free that we can offer to students, so that when they are meeting expectations and they're earning those universal reinforcers, those tickets, we're able to give them really unique opportunities to turn those in. Some high schoolers are like, I don't need anything. I actually want like a service opportunity. Like I want to be able to use my tickets to buy canned food that we then donate, or like the local animal shelter. I want to be able to use these tickets to make a donation. So it's really cool to think about, again, like asking kids, what are you interested in? And how do we just offer that variety? So we kind of talked through first, here's how we're going to teach this. Then we talked about reinforcement. How do we notice when this is happening and how do we celebrate it so that it happens more and more? And now we're going to think about monitoring. How do we know if this is working? And when we think about monitoring in your Ci3T system, we're looking at different levels. We're thinking about looking at social validity, which is what are people's perceptions of this plan? Is it working? Do I think this will work? Is it important? Is it feasible? Can I do this? Then there's treatment integrity. Is the plan being implemented as intended, as designed? And then we've got those student level outcomes, screening at both academic and behavior. And we use those data to make decisions. And all of this information, if you're at a school that's implementing Ci3T, you'll find this information in your manual. There's a whole section here on procedures for monitoring where we're thinking both at like student measures, so student level data, as well as program measures, which is that treatment integrity and social validity. You'll notice a sample assessment schedule in your manual, and that is laying out for you exactly when we're collecting these data. So when we think about those student measures, we're thinking about things like behavior screening. So maybe your school might use the student risk screening scale for internalizing and externalizing. And if so, we've got a great module for you. And if your school uses a different behavior screener, something that's administered to every single student 3 times a year, that's telling you kind of different levels of risk, there's another module that is a great place to start to think about what does that look like. You're also thinking about things like academic data, both screening data, but also those curriculum measures, progress reports, grades, GPA, depending on your grade level. We're also looking at things like absences and tardies and nurse visits. Those can be really informative. Do we have a student who goes to the nurse every single day during math class? Maybe something's going on there. Thinking also about like bullying or counselor referrals, just what is the data that your school has available that you can look at to make decisions to say, how are we doing? Is our plan being implemented like we think it is? And is it having the effect that we are hoping for? And if you want to learn more about how we use these different types of data, specifically systematic screening data, both to inform our Tier 1 instruction, inform use of low-intensity strategies, and to connect students to Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports, we would love to see you in 2 short weeks in October. That's going to be the topic of our next session, and we're really going to dive into examples of what does this look like? How do we make sense of these data, and how do we use that to engage in some data-informed decision-making of what to do for the adults and also for the kids in our building. Also on your assessment calendar, we've got all those student measures. There's also these measures that are like program measures. So this is looking at treatment integrity and social validity specifically. So we're thinking about, why do we collect these data? We do it to get a snapshot. This is giving us just a really quick moment in time of how is things going. And we use it to make decisions. What are the benefits? It gives us a chance to celebrate. It can be really easy to get caught up in the hustle and bustle, and especially we're going into October, there's just a lot going on. It's really important to zoom out and say, let's think about what we're doing and doing really well. Like, we rolled out the year. We started the school year. Like, it's September. It's the end of September. There are things to celebrate, even when it feels really hard. There are still bright spots. There are still things that are going well, and we want to make sure we pause and celebrate that. It gives faculty and staff a voice, a chance to share their perceptions and their experience in one place to capture all of that information so that that can be heard and decisions can be made based on it. And it gives us a chance to be really strategic in what we prioritize for growth. And then we use the data to think through professional learning for adults, to look at what is our Tier 1 instruction looking like, and to really make sure we're building and maintaining that strong foundation of what it looks like in our building. And if you're interested in learning a little bit more about this, we've got 2 great modules that might be of interest. This blue one is all about getting ready to collect those data, so social validity and treatment integrity. And then this green one dives into kind of making some decisions based on that. On those modules, you're going to find that infographic that we looked at, as well as some great videos that are short and easy to share out with faculty and staff. And the reason why we want to make sure we spend some time thinking about this is these are data points that you can use to really measure and celebrate success. When we think about like, what are we going for? What are we headed for? We want to think about if we're doing Ci3T, we want to make sure we know how well we're doing it and we're celebrating that growth and we're setting goals that are aligned to it. So maybe we're setting a goal about treatment integrity or we're setting a goal about how we're going to use our data. So with that, we are about to move back into our breakout rooms for another conversation. And we invite you just to think about so far, what are some strengths you notice at the school, at your school, or in your own classroom, and how you've rolled out procedures for teaching, how you've rolled out reinforcing and monitoring, and then any new ideas or resources that you might want to explore.
So tonight's frame was all about just taking a moment to set the stage for the what we are planning to do and how we are planning to do it. So we talked about those 3 domains at the very beginning, thinking about academics, thinking about behavior, thinking about social and emotional well-being. The stuff that you're learning in different places, you'll make decisions as an educator, as a leader, about what to put into the framework. But the framework doesn't change because the idea is those are the 3 main priorities. Those are the things that we are trying to accomplish. So if we go back to our why and the mission of what you're trying to accomplish, I believe we're trying to create positive, productive, safe, and I would say joyful learning environments where kids want to be and they can become productive lifelong learners. So to make that happen, you have to go from the idea of the vision of what we're going to accomplish academically and behaviorally and social and emotional well-being. So when you heard Elise talk about the way that you teach it, it's not teaching it separately, it's teaching it in an integrated way, and it's teaching it in a way where people can stay connected to it. And our learning needs are going to change over time. Kids are going to make progressions in some areas and maybe less so in others. So I just want to say, as you saw Wendy and Elise pointing out, there's different points of learning that's planned for the rest of this year that ideally is going to move through this whole data informed process. So as you're wrapping up and moving forward, I really do want to reinforce the idea that when a kid needs more than Tier 1 has to offer, that is not a tragedy. It is an absolute expectation. And so in our buildings and in our districts, in our classrooms, we want to make sure that we've got a plan on what we're going to do when a child needs more than Tier 1 has to offer. It doesn't mean we're a bad teacher. It doesn't mean we've missed the mark. It just means that we need to go back to that research-informed practice. So all of the things that are happening inside this framework are research informed. It's all grounded in applied behavior analytic principles. And then I like to think of it as the Nancy Drew of instruction. So you're trying to figure out what is the need for my class, for this individual student, knowing that it's going to fluctuate over time. So I really appreciate both Wendy and Elise, highlighting for us what's coming next. And right now we're going to push pause and you're going to think about what's coming next for you. So when you walk out of here today, we talked about how to launch the school year, and you heard people, like I heard talking in the breakout rooms about like the importance of reteaching expected behavior. I heard talk about a good time to reteach is when you come back from break. So like from fall break, from Thanksgiving break, from winter break, from spring break. So and I heard a lot of people love pre-correction. Those things can go together. So one of your action items for today might be, I'm going to put in my master calendar plans to reteach expectations across breaks. That might be a takeaway. Here are some other things that we put as potential action items. You might think, you know what, I want to send out tomorrow to my teacher friends that are in my PLC group, I want to send them out that video on Ci3T lesson plans. As you're getting ready to do all this big development of Ci3T, you might choose to send that out to say, here's some of the ways we're going to, continue to hone in and use visible learning in our integrated approach to instruction. And it might be that you've heard some great ideas about the reinforcement. If I were you, I'd be downloading that chat so that I could grab some of those ideas for later. And a big theme of that is listening to what people want to get and what people want to avoid, because what's motivating to one is not motivating to everyone. I actually keep in my email, and I have done this since 1996. Every time I change computers, I bring this folder over, and it's called SR Plus, which stands for Positive Reinforcer. So when somebody emails me a praise note, like a kind note in an email, I take it, I read it, I thank them, and then I file it. And then my favorite holiday is Easter. And on Easter, I have a routine where on that day I send an email to people that are important in my life. And then I go through and read the reinforcers. Some years there's not many in there, but some years there are. But I hang on to those because that very specific, behavior specific praise, those are things that feed my soul. And I'm not saying you need to do that, but I am saying find something that is your reinforcer and solicit your own naturally occurring reinforcers. So I'm going to ask people right now to think is what is one takeaway, something that you learned tonight, something that you want to do, something you want to remember to do. And it might even just be calendaring a couple moments to go back and check something out. So if would 3 to 4 people just pop into the chat, and if you're going to be a brave one of those people, or more than 3 or 4 is also very good. But go ahead and pop in the chat. What's a takeaway action item for you? Great. The short videos in the monthly newsletter. Such a good idea. And then it's interactive. That's great. Wonderful. That's great ideas. Good. And I agree. I was just talking with an assistant superintendent today about the why of treatment integrity and social validity. And the big point is that's not a research thing. That is a life thing. You need to make sure we're doing systems change that involves changing opportunities for teachers and faculty and staff and administrators. So we need to make sure they have a voice. Their voice is getting to fill out that social validity input in fall and spring to say, here's what I think about the goals, the procedures, and the outcomes, and then looking to see what is happening with implementation. And we've now done studies that have shown what people think about the goals, the procedure, and the outcomes actually predicts how well they put it in place. So if you're interested in growing the green, so to speak, like the percentage of kids in low risk categories getting better, we have to make sure that we have that feedback loop. And I will say, sometimes people think, oh, I want to protect my teachers. I don't want them to have to fill out that extra survey or do the treatment integrity. You're taking away an opportunity for them to give you feedback. And you're taking away an opportunity for them to give you input that could inform their professional learning. So as we wrap up and move forward tonight, if you have questions about how those things work together, we can definitely address those here in our trainer and coaches calls. And tonight you saw Wendy and Elise walk through what's coming next over the course of the year. So if you're interested in coming back, next time is going to be all about screening, and we've got some new opportunities for how screening data can be done. We've got the integrated lesson plans that you've heard about, those specific strategies, and then progressing all the way from, responding respectfully to challenging behaviors to supporting using a new intervention, how to support students who are managing anxious feelings. And we've had a lot of requests for that. And most people have said, I wish that one was earlier. So we actually have 4 districts that we're actually going to go visit in person because they want the help now. So we're looking forward to that. And then we're going to wrap up with Elise's second child. It's a functional assessment-based intervention. She has a real human first child, but this is the second one. So working with kids with intensive intervention needs. And then the last thing I wanted to show you before you leave is that if you have times where you just want to drop in, feel free to come. You can come as a team. I know it's got a large group here tonight. So if you want to come and talk a little bit more about like the fundamentals of ABA and how that works together, you can come to one of those coaching calls and we'll pop in a breakout room. We know that people that are building out their own series right now, so like as you're thinking about building it, think about using that as a space where people can come to talk about the details of training and getting things together and putting together your district masters, and of course, people coming for implementation. So thank you very much. We appreciate the gift of your time and your talent. I want to thank all the Ci3T research team coaches for being here. So we'll look forward to seeing people next time. We're going to stay on in case people had any additional questions or comments.